Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to East Central Missouri and the world, and welcome to the James Strong Show podcast number 314. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making us a part of your day. I appreciate it. This podcast was recorded on the morning of Saturday, May the 6th, from the James Strong Studio in Western St. Charles County. Are you a baseball fan? Are you a sports fan? Most of us are, to some extent. Maybe even if we're not big fans of the big four sports, baseball, football, hockey, basketball. I mean, soccer is becoming more popular. Other sports are becoming more popular. Baseball has been called the great American pastime. Maybe sports in general are the great American pastime. We all have more in common with one another when we watch sports. It's mindless entertainment. It's an escape. You can fill in the blank. It's you can remember back in the day when you used to do that type of stuff and maybe watch people do it. It's enjoyable. It's been enjoyable. Watching sports has been an enjoyable leisure activity probably since the Industrial Revolution, when people actually had a little bit of time on their hands, when they didn't have to worry about working 12 hours a day to make sure that they could get 2 meals a day, okay? The Industrial Revolution brought leisure time. Leisure time was filled with sports, playing and then watching. But like everything else, sports have changed. What's changed about them? Sure, the money, introduction, et cetera, et cetera. But I will introduce the argument that the biggest change in sports is sports betting. So I asked the question in today's essay: has sports betting ruined sports? I've read countless articles, talked to lots of people, and come to the conclusion that, yeah, I think sports betting is ruining sports. Perhaps it's already ruined it. It has for me. Perhaps it has for others too. That is the topic of today's essay, and that comes along shortly. In the meantime, other stuff to cover. I want to give everybody an update on the restoration project for the 1951 Jaguar Mark 7. I said after the podcast I'm going to work on the vehicle. I did. Dad came out to help as well, and we actually had progress. The big thing was, I'd mentioned before in the podcast, I was putting these little bitty boxes of stuff onto the firewall. And right now, half of my shop is littered with all the stuff that has to go onto the car. And I'm having to step over it, walk over it. I'm thinking to myself, at this rate, I'm never going to get this stuff off the floor. So my thinking was, if I put the bigger stuff on first, I'll have more room on the floor, because the big stuff and the small stuff all has to go on, right? What's the biggest thing sitting on the floor? The radiator. So it went in last Saturday. And the radiator goes in with 4 bolts. However, it was a little tougher than that. The 4 bolts come in from the side, not the bottom. Another news flash of fantastic British engineering. Why they did it this way, I don't know, but it works. But in order to get the radiator in, with the engine being so close to the car, I had to take away a lot of the framework in the front. So the framework had to be removed. Then the radiator had to be put in, and then it had to be kind of boosted up to put the screws in, the bolts in, except for you need 3 hands to do that. And Dad had not arrived yet, so I didn't know how to do this with 3 hands. Well, luckily, a friend came by just to take his boys by the shop to see what the car looked like. So I said, hey, as long as you're here, lend me a hand. So he did. He kind of held it in place. I got the bolts in. Radiator went in just fine. Dad came by. We put on the hoses, put the framework back on after the radiator was assembled. The breather had to be moved. For some reason, the guys, when they put the engine together, they put the breather on backwards. Not backwards, but clocked at the wrong position. And you think to yourself, well, what do you mean a breather, Strong? Well, crank cases have to breathe, okay? That's just how they work. And modern cars use a PCV valve. PCV is positive crankcase ventilation. And it's a it's a air pollution thing. The older cars just have a breather tube that comes out that lets them breathe, and the exhaust and the gas and stuff from the inside of the crankcase just breathes out the side. Well, they had it pointing up, not pointing to the side. So I had to take it apart, put it back together. Now it's coming from the side the way it should. I cleaned the flasher junctions, took all that apart, cleaned them all up, put the rusted, the rusted connectors, clean those up, put everything back together. Couldn't put it on the car because I did not have bolts. Ordered the bolts, picked them up on Friday, and I will assemble that today. So that's the progress on the Jaguar this week. Last week, I'll be doing more this week, and next week I'll give you another update. This week I was in Wisconsin, and I flew to Milwaukee, and the airports are busy again. Flights there and back, jam-packed. On the way back, we flew in a big Boeing 737 MAX, which are beautiful planes, just beautiful planes. I know they got bad press at first, and maybe there were some problems with them at first, but they're a beautiful plane. They're a wonderful plane. They hold 174 people. Every seat was occupied, okay? So airports are busy again. So when it's coming home from Milwaukee on a Thursday evening and the plane is packed, you got to figure that all flights are packed, and pretty much they are. People are traveling again. To travel anywhere, you've got to have an ID. If you travel within the U.S., you have to have a driver's license, but pretty soon you're going to need a driver's license with more information. I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but I always just travel with a passport. Give them the passport, that has all the information. I don't worry about it. And it used to take about 5, 6, 7 weeks to get a passport max. Not anymore. 10 to 13 weeks to get a passport. Now, it used to be 5 to 7 weeks, according to this article in the Wall Street Journal. But passport renewals are way up. In fact, the State Department recorded that they're processing an average of 500,000 applications for passports every week. That's up some 40% from last year. Now, you think to yourself, well, I don't think I need a passport. Well, actually, you kind of do. If you think to yourself you're never going to travel, okay, fine. If you're never going to travel, you don't need a passport. But if you're going to travel any place other than the continental United States or Puerto Rico, yeah, you need a passport. And I would say that even if you're going to just, say you're going to fly to Hawaii, say you're going to go to Puerto Rico, say you're going to the U.S. Virgin Islands, you still kind of need a passport, because what if there's a problem with the plane and they have to land in another country to fix the plane? Friends, you're not getting off that airplane, or at least maybe they'll let you in the airport, but you're not going anywhere without that passport. If you just want to go across the border to Canada, across the border to Mexico, you need a passport. So if you're even maybe going to travel in the future, I'd recommend getting a passport. Cost $130, okay? Plus a $35 acceptance fee, which they used to cost about half that, but okay, the government's jacked it up and there's an income stream for them. However, if you're used to a 5 to 7 week lead time, and now it's 10 to 13 weeks. Oh, by the way, 10 to 13 weeks, plus they say you need to allow for postage there and back. They recommend adding an extra 2 weeks each way for postage, okay? So go to the long end of that's a 17-week lead time, friends, to get a stupid passport. Government services at their best. Now you can do other things. You can get an expedite. You can pay an expedite fee. That's another extra $60, and then they'll try real hard to help you out getting it sooner with no guarantees. So that's an extra $60. Plus you can get expedited delivery, which means maybe they'll walk it to the mailbox the same week it's processed. That's an extra $20. Okay. They also have special passport courier services. So you can go to an organization like AAA, and they will make sure you get it real fast. In fact, they're saying, look, we'll get it to you in 1 week, okay? And it just costs an extra, in 2 weeks, I'm sorry. That just costs an extra $600. You need it in just 1 week? That's an extra $800. An extra $800. And of course, they say they're going to try to do that. So you can get a passport expedited in a week. Okay, you can do that, or close to a week. It's going to cost you close to $1,000. There's no need for that. In other words, this is another example of government saying, look, you're going to stand in lines until your hair turns gray, because we just absolutely positively cannot do it any quicker. Unless you give us more money, and then it's going to be real quick. Friends, that's a big problem. And it seems to be getting worse all the time. I had mentioned that I went to Green Bay this week. And if you think it's cold in the Midwest, or you think we've had kind of a cold spell, cool spell, you're right, we have. But friends, on the way up to Green Bay, Wisconsin had 4 inches of snow on Sunday night. So there was none on the streets, but there was plenty on the grass. So as I'm driving up to Green Bay on Monday, I was greeted with snow. The temperature never got out of the 30s. It's still wintertime up there. Cold, cold, cold. Speaking along the lines of poor customer service from the government, most places have poor customer service. And I'm going to go ahead and rag on Enterprise Rental Car again. Now, they're the people that I use. Maybe I won't be using them in the future because they've just turned horrible. All they care about is getting a 10 out of 10 on their customer service. Case in point, this week I had another problem with Enterprise. Seems like every week I rent from those people, it's a new problem that takes up a bunch of my time. This time, $303 was the estimate to rent a car for 1 week. Well, a Monday morning through Thursday night in Milwaukee. Okay, that's just what it costs now. It's a lot more than it used to be, but I get it. Everything's more expensive. $303 was the estimate. I understand it's an estimate. Sometimes it's a little more, sometimes it's a little less. Usually within about $10, which I understand that. Okay, it is an estimate. So the guy comes in. How is our customer service? I said, well, all you've done is greeted me and said, how was my customer service? You haven't done anything for me yet, but sure, it was fine. Okay, here's your bill. It's $335. Does that sound about right? I said, well, let me find out. I pulled out my receipt. I said, no, it should be $303. Oh, well, what time did you rent it? And I felt like saying, you've got the information in front of me, son. Why don't you look at to see how much time when I open up this rental? But I got out my paperwork and I got the email from them. I said, okay, here we go. 12:58 p.m. on Monday. That's when I picked up the car. That's the timestamp that you can probably see in front of you too, but here it is. Oh, okay. Well, in that case, it's not $335. It's $260. And I said, wait a minute. I said, why did you go from $330 to $260? Why was it different? He said, well, we just charge you for the whole extra day. I said, why? I didn't bring it in at the end of the whole extra day. He said, yeah, I know. That's just the default. We just charge you for the whole day. Most people say that's fine and don't even complain about it. And I looked at the kid and I said, what do you mean? You charge them extra because most people don't complain is basically what you're telling me. He said, yeah, that's kind of basically it. I said, okay, well then why did you change it from $335 to $260 and not from $335 to $303? He said, honestly? I said, I'd like an honest answer, yes. Well, I'm just doing that so you'll stop complaining and leave me alone so I can get on with the next customer. And I looked at him, I said, okay, thanks. Then out comes the hand is, how was our customer service? And I said, fine, just give me the receipt, please. And he did. And I thought to myself, was it a bribe? You wanted to get 10 out of 10, so you threw money at me? I guess it worked. But the difference between $330 versus $260, that's a lot of money, friends. And I got to think, is there even a rhyme or reason? Does Enterprise say, you know what, just charge them for the whole day, charge them a whole lot extra, and if they take it, fine. If they don't, throw money at them till they stop crabbing? I found that very bizarre, but that's kind of how things work nowadays. You have to beat on them and beat on them and beat on them because they're beating on you. And the beatings will stop until morale improves. It's the old British saying, okay? It was just bizarre. And this wasn't the first bad experience I had with customer service that day. Lunch in the Milwaukee airport. Not a ton of options, but it is an airport, and it's a smaller airport. In fact, once you get past security in the Southwest Terminal, there's basically sandwich shops and a pizza joint, okay, and coffee and that type of thing. There's no real sit-down restaurants with food that I can eat without getting a stomach ache. But before you go in, there's it's like a sports bar when you walk in. It's in the atrium. It's called the Miller High Life Experience or something like that. And they have a good salmon salad there. I've had it before. Salmon salad and a tomato soup. I usually get that. So I sat down at the table, and there's the dreaded barcode. Okay, there's going to be no waiter here. You scan the barcode, you order your food, you do all the work yourself, and they bring it out to you. Okay, I get it. That's just how they do things nowadays. So I scanned the barcode, entered my order, finished my order, and I got an error. Sorry, you can't do that from here because your waiter has not opened up this table. All right. In other words, they've got to open up the table. In other words, you got to go to the bar, stand in line until the one guy at the bar recognizes you, comes over, asks you what you need. You tell him, look, I can't get into the barcode on that table. He says, okay, let me open it up for you. He goes back, he opens it up. Then you go back, you start all over and order your order again. Okay. So all that was done. I went back and placed my order with the kitchen once again. This time it worked. They don't have the tomato soup anymore, but they still had the salmon salad, which was fine. Placed my order. The guy brought the food. I ate the food. It was actually pretty good. Now, at the airport, a salmon salad with a glass of water will cost you over $20. But again, that's just what things cost. So you're done. And when you're done, you go to pay the check. Actually, before they deliver the food, you pay the check. Yeah, you pay the bill before they even bring you the food. But again, that's just how this thing works. And at the end, it has an option for tips. I'm thinking to myself, okay, why would I want to give a tip? Because right now, I've done 100% of the work. Now, there'll be those that'll argue, no, somebody cooked your food. Okay, that's part of it. That's why the salmon salad costs $20, because somebody had to cook it. I had to go stand in line, place my order, have me told that the order's not placeable because you got to go to the guy and have him open up the table. Did that. He opened up the table. I did all the work entering the order, and then they asked for a tip. Well, that's okay. This is easy. I'll just say no tip. One problem. You have to address that part of the portal before it lets you move on and close out the order. There is no option for zero tip. You must leave a tip. And the options are 15%, 20%, 25%. And I'm thinking to myself, what the heck is going on here? I'm not leaving a tip because he did no work. There's one other option. Cash tip. I checked that. Oh, by the way, you may think me an ass. I didn't leave him a cash tip. He didn't do any work. So not only do you have to do all the work for the order, but they expect you to leave a tip, 20% minimum. Friends, maybe I'm just becoming an old man, but that to me is very bizarre. Well, let's get into the essay today. Has sports betting ruined sports? You could make the argument that it has. You can make the argument that it has not. But let's look to see what's going on in sports right now. We are the 6th of May, well into the season. And who's atop the leagues? Let's go down the list. In the American League East, The Tampa Bay Rays, first place with a record of 26-6. I mean, they have the best record in baseball and one of the lowest payrolls. Second place, Baltimore Orioles. Again, one of the lowest payrolls in baseball, but they're in second place. And rounding out that league is the Red Sox, Blue Jays, and Yankees. They have high payrolls. And as of today, they wouldn't even make the playoffs. The Central, it's a weak division. The Twins are on top. And basically the Twins, the AL Central is like the National League Central. No real good teams there. Some are pretty good. None of them have high payrolls. It is what it is. American League West. On top of the American League West, the Texas Rangers. Lowest payroll in the division except for the Oakland A's, who have just basically given up. Oakland A's are in last place. But the Rangers have the second lowest payroll in that division. They're in first place. Angels, Astros, and Mariners, huge payrolls. If the playoffs were today, they wouldn't be making the playoffs. Let's go to the National League. National League East, the Braves, high payroll, first place. Mets, high payroll, second place. But they're only a 500 team. Marlins, Phillies, Nationals. Phillies, huge payroll, second last place. If the playoffs were today, the Braves would make the playoffs. The Mets would not. National League Central, again, a bunch of mediocre teams, but the team on top, the Pittsburgh Pirates, 20-12. The rest of the teams, the Brewers, they're in second place. Then the Cubs, Reds, and Cardinals. Nobody has a huge payroll. Cardinals actually have the highest payroll in the division, and they're in last place. National League West, Dodgers are on top. They have second highest payroll in baseball after the Mets. But after that are the Diamondbacks, one of the lowest payrolls in baseball. Third are the Padres. They have one of the highest payrolls in baseball. If the playoffs were today, the Padres wouldn't make the playoffs. They just wouldn't. They're not good enough. Now you think to yourself, okay, well that happens in sports all the time, Strong. The best teams, the ones that spend the most money, don't always win, which is true. And it is early May. There's another almost over 4.5 months left of the season. That's true too. However, I don't know that I can remember so many bad teams doing so well ever. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that there's more parity in baseball than ever before? Maybe. Does that mean that some of these young players from some of these poor teams are actually just doing better than some of the older players making all the money? Maybe that's true too. And that's always been kind of the case. You always have your April surprises, okay? And come June, July, those teams are back in the cellar where you expect them to be. And maybe come June or July, that'll be the case as well. Maybe not. But there's one thing that's different in baseball and football and basketball. Hockey, I can't comment because I don't know a whole lot about hockey. But those other three sports, there is one thing that's different. And it has to do with sports betting. When I'm at the gym, they'll have one of the ESPN channels on, ESPN2 usually, okay? And I will tell you that ESPN2 has basically turned into a sports book station. They've got, the little boxes at the bottom showing stuff, the scrolls at the bottom showing stuff. Those have been active for quite some time. Anymore, quite often on ESPN2, the little box is the programming. It's a box that's maybe takes up about half the screen, maybe less, in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. The rest of it is all the betting, the odds, the over and under for every team that's playing. And I don't mean just the football teams and basketball teams and baseball team. College teams, you name it, there's a line on them. Now, why do they do this? Well, it's like anything else. They do it because people want to see it. In fact, American gambling has always been a big thing for people. I've never understood it. I don't have anything against gambling. I've never been a gambler. It just doesn't trip my trigger. It's never interested me. But Americans gambled away a record-breaking amount of money in 2022. In fact, the nation's casinos and mobile gaming apps rang up a record 54, almost 55 billion in revenue during the first 11 months of 2022. That's revenue. You think to yourself, wow, Strong, you mean people gambled $55 billion in money? No, that's not what I said. The casinos made $55 billion in profits. Translation, people lost $55 billion in 2022. And that was just for the first 11 months, according to this article. That smashed the record from 2021, okay, by 13% over the first 11 months only. That's according to data collected from state regulators by the American Gaming Association. Now, here's the other thing. Those numbers don't include Indian casinos because they're their own entity. And it also doesn't include illegal gambling, which you know is huge. That's the stuff that the state regulates only. Now, that's gambling as a whole, not just sports betting. Slot machines, gaming tables, they generated the most revenue out of any form of gambling. Slots and table games across the U.S. generated 43 billion. Okay. Sports bettors, how much do you think people wagered on sports betting in this country? Wagered, not profits, but how much do you think they wagered? Over 83 billion in the first 11 months of 2022. Sportbook alone, they made almost $7 billion off those wagers. That's only sports books, okay? But that's a 65% increase over the same period in 2021. They made 65% more money than they did the year before. Billions of dollars. Now, over the past year, Americans spent $56 billion on attending sporting events. That includes tickets, transportation, food, and beverages. Okay? Now, why do I throw that number out there? Well, here's why it's important. And here's why I say sports betting may have ruined sports. Because sports is all about the money. Nobody, absolutely nobody who owns a sports team does it because they just think it's fun. It's just a hobby. Even that Mr. Cohen from the Mets. I know that's what he says, but I'm not buying it for a minute. I'm going to repeat this again. Over the past years, Americans spent $56 billion on attending sporting events. That's tickets, transportation, food, and beverages. So that's everything. That's just not the price of the ticket. That's the price of the experience. Okay, and everything included. $56 billion. They wagered $83 billion on sports. Think about that, friends. That's quick math. That's almost $30 billion more spent on sports betting than they spent on attending the game. $56 billion on attending the sporting events, $83 billion on gambling. Now, it's estimated that between 10 and 40% of revenues made by professional sports leagues come from tickets, concessions, merchandising, parking services, and more. Now, certain merchandise deals, that's extra revenue, that's not included. Think about that. Anywhere from 10 to 40% of revenues made by professional sports league come from tickets, concessions, merchandising, parking services, and more. As little as 10%, no more than 40%. So in any situation, less than half of their revenues come from people watching the game. The average attendance per game in 2019, this is a couple years earlier than that, was the average attendance per game was 28,000. The average ticket price was $33. That means per game, per team, teams averaged about $1 million in game receipts. Okay? $1 million. That's about $82 million a year. Are the Cardinals an average team? Yeah. They draw more than average attendance. They have higher than average payroll, but they're somewhere near the middle of the pack. They're not the Yankees. They're not the Dodgers. They're not the Padres. They're not the Astros. They're not the Braves. They don't spend that kind of money. They're not the Mets. So they're somewhere in the middle. So let's say they're in the middle. So their gate receipts were average. Their gate receipts then, that's everything. Concessions, tickets, parking, blah, 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 blah. Million per game. 162 games a year, but only half of them are in the stadium. So that's $81 million. Friends, that doesn't cover payroll. That doesn't even cover the payroll. In fact, let me go one step further. That doesn't cover the payroll of the baseball players. You think, well, what else is there? Well, there's the whole minor league system that has to be supported. Now, yeah, they have attendance too, but it doesn't pay much. It pays for the front office. There's got to be profits for Mr. DeWitt to put in his pocket because he does it for a profit. There are hundreds and hundreds of people who are just support staff that work for that team. They got to all get on an airplane and fly someplace multiple times a year. They got to stay in hotels. They've got to eat. Owning a baseball team is expensive. And the fans in the seats doesn't even cover enough to make payroll. And then there's the net worth of teams. They all have a net worth assigned to them, okay? Yankees are worth $17.13 billion. They're the most valuable sports baseball team, okay? The Marlins are worth about $1 billion. Cardinals, they're worth $2.44 billion. Okay, that's what the Cardinals are rated as being worth. Now, revenue, Yankees had almost $500 million in revenue last year, 15 times earnings. If you go to the earnings plus divided, or net worth divided by earnings, okay, 15 times earnings. Cardinals, $287 million. They're 9 times earning. The Marlins, the worst team, the Miami Marlins or Florida Marlins, $86 million. That's 12 times earnings if you take what the team earned versus what the team's worth, okay? But then you figure, well, yeah, strong. They make all their money on cable, on TV rights. Many do. The Cardinals and most other teams, or many other teams, they go through Ballys. Ballys something or another. It used to be Fox Sports, now it's Ballys. They're bankrupt. So those sports teams are not going to be getting that revenue this year. Now, I've heard people say, well, yeah, strong, but that's a good thing because now they can have their own sports station and they can just take all the money themselves. Think about that for a moment. That may be the most knot-headed statement ever made by anybody. Now, why do you say that? Okay, so the Cardinals now own the equivalent of Bally Sports, and they can broadcast all their own games and take in all their own revenue, which, okay, let's say they can. Will they make more money on the games? Maybe. Let's just say they do. How are they going to fill programming on that station? Okay, you say to yourself, well, they'll put the baseball games on, dummy, and then they'll play them over again. Okay, first of all, nobody wants to watch a baseball game that was on yesterday. Nobody. If they own their own network and they televise every game, and let's say you allow 5 hours per game, that's pregame, game, postgame. You can't stretch it out more than 5 hours. You just can't. But let's say they do. 162 times 5 hours, that's 810 hours per year of programming. More if you throw in spring training. By the way, they're not going to get the playoffs because the playoffs are going to be negotiated off to a network. That's 810 hours a year of programming. What are they going to show on that station the rest of the year? Now, Bally Sports puts on baseball, basketball, hockey, sports, pickleball, poker tournaments, interviews, you name it, they play it. If the Cardinals own the network, they're just going to put baseball stuff on, okay? You can't run a network on 810 hours a year of programming. It doesn't work. Because in June and July, sure, everybody will watch it. January and February, nobody is going to watch that station. 0 people. And the way it works nowadays, you've got to employ those people 12 months a year. No one's going to say, yeah, I'll work for you for 4 months a year, 6 months a year. No one's going to do that. It doesn't work that way. And you think to yourself, where else is the rest of the money going to come from? Let's get back to sports betting. Earlier this year, Alabama, not the football team that everybody knows about, and not even the basketball team, which was number one in the country for part of the year this year, but the baseball team. They got their baseball coach. Alabama's baseball coach was a guy named Brad Bohannon. Yeah, was. Not anymore. He was fired this week. Why? Sports betting. Now I'm going to read this story to you. And a big flag was raised on this that I heard absolutely nobody bringing up. But I'm going to read the story. Alabama has fired baseball head coach Brad Bohannon following an ESPN report regarding suspicious wagering activity related to the team's games. New Jersey, Ohio, and Pennsylvania are no longer allowing bettors to place wagers on the Crimson Tide games while an investigation is going on. Now, according to ESPN's report, the Ohio Casino Control Commission suspended betting on the team's games after U.S. Integrity, which is a Las Vegas independent company, detected some suspicious bets on Friday's Alabama LSU game. According to NOLA, and that's the organization, there are a parlay involving Alabama LSU as well as a large straight bet on LSU to win. Now, why did that happen? Well, here's the part that nobody's asking about. Surveillance video from the BetMGM Sportsbook at Great American Ballpark in Cincinnati, where the bets were placed, indicated that the bettor was communicating with Bohannon at the time the wagers were placed. Now, Alabama pitcher Luke Holman was slated to start the contest, but reliever Hagan Banks was told an hour before the game that he would be starting instead. So, apparently what's happened here is this coach, Brad Bohannon, was in contact with a bunch of people, placed bets on his team to lose, changed the pitching rotation so his team had more of a chance of losing, shared this with people, and a bunch of betting was changed. Bohannon makes $475 a year as the baseball coach at Alabama. So the guy makes the guy makes almost $500,000 a year as a salary. So is he doing this to line his pockets? Maybe. But he did it to line the pockets of other people because he changed this pitching rotate or the pitcher. The bets changed and he was in contact with a bunch of people. Here's what raises the flag. They don't name the people, but then maybe they don't know the people because the investigation is ongoing. Here's the thing that raised a flag that nobody is mentioning, and that's where this took place. I'm going to read it again. Maybe you didn't catch it. Surveillance video from the BetMGM Sportsbook at Great American Ballpark in Cincinnati. Friend, that's where the Cincinnati Reds play baseball. They have a sports book in the stadium where the Cincinnati Reds play baseball. Do you think that's not bizarre? Hey, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to go watch the Cincinnati Reds game. Oh, and while I go out to get a beer, I'm going to place a sports bet. Maybe on the Cincinnati Reds to win, lose, or draw. Now, who is arguably one of the best players ever to play the game? Pete Rose. Is he in the Hall of Fame? No. Why? He bet on baseball. His glory years were with the Cincinnati Reds. So this bad guy, Pete Rose, who was a star for years and years and years with the Cincinnati Reds, Pete Rose has more hits than anybody that's ever played the game. No one will ever break that record either because people don't play 25 or 30 years anymore like Rose did. But the thing is, you can place bets at the stadium on sports where Pete Rose played. That, my friends, is bizarre. And a guy making $500,000 a year change his pitchers, and then a bunch of sports betting went the other way. Who do you think he talked to? Who do you think he talked to? Was it the colleges who wanted to make more money? Which goes back to how I opened up this segment. The leaders in 1, 2, 3, 4 of the 6 divisions are scrubs. What are the odds for any of those teams to win? 100 to 1, 200 to 1, 1,000 to 1? If the playoffs were today, those teams would all be in the playoffs. So all the money that picked these teams like the Mets, the Phillies, the Padres, some of the other teams, the Yankees. Yankees are in last place, just like the Cardinals. The Blue Jays, the Red Sox, the Angels, the Astros, the Mariners. All these teams that spend big money. They wouldn't even make the playoffs. Who benefits on something like that? The sports book. If you want to place a bet in Cincinnati on sports, where do you go? You go to the BetMGM Sportsbook in Great American Ballpark, where the Cincinnati Reds play baseball. Now, what am I insinuating here? Well, if attendance in the ballpark doesn't even make payroll, and these teams are still worth billions of dollars on paper, where else are they getting their money? Ballys Sports broadcasts sports games. Ballys. It's a casino company. And they went bankrupt. Am I wrong? Is this a conspiracy theory in me? Just a conspiracy theorist in me just going hog wild? Maybe. Maybe it is. But sometimes the way to find out the answer to a problem is you eliminate all the possibilities, and what is left is the solution. If attendance at baseball games doesn't even cover payroll for the ball players, and those teams are no longer getting revenue from the bankrupt Bally Sports organizations that were supposed to pay them money, how else are they getting their money? You can only sell so many fancy jerseys to make the money. You got to be making it some other way. And more money was spent on sports betting than was spent on baseball, on watching baseball teams. Don't you think they probably won in on that? That's what I think. But then you make your own decision. You make your own choice. You decide if I'm full of baloney. You decide if I'm not full of baloney. You decide if I'm making a point. Maybe do some investigating on your own if you like. But there's a real possibility that these teams are throwing games and these teams are manipulating the results of these games to make money. Where there's smoke, there's certainly fire. Well, that's it. We're done. JamesStrongShow@hotmail.com. That's the email address. Send me your email address. I will send you a link to the podcast upon publication so you can download it and listen to it at your leisure. If you don't want to do that, just wherever you get podcasts, you can go ahead and go there and find the podcast. iTunes, iHeartRadio, Player FM, Facebook, Twitter, TuneIn, Radio Online, YouTube, the podcast app, Podcaster with 2 R's, and of course, Spreaker.com. That's it. I'm done. Until next time, this is James Strong saying adios.